Chevy Traverse with the 3.6 liter 6-cylinder engine, and it came to me with the check engine light on and kind of misfiring and hesitating a little bit. And after doing just a basic scan of all the modules and the PCM, its powertrain control module, I found a couple of pending misfire codes for a couple of different cylinders and a P0300 and a P420 catalyst efficiency below threshold, efficiency threshold, and a bunch of other things that I wasn't really worried about. But I'm going to deal with this first by doing a pretty good sized tune-up today. I'm going to change all 6 spark plugs and I'm going to change all 6 ignition coils. This engine has over 200,000 miles on it. And so in my personal opinion and recommendation, based on what I am seeing with the misfiring and the check engine light being on and the mileage, I'm just pulling the trigger on these parts first, which if this is the scenario with your vehicle, I recommend that you do that, or at least start with spark plugs just to get the ball rolling in the right direction. Spark plugs alone are not a tune-up. Spark plugs, I'll repeat, spark plugs alone are not a tune-up. Whatever people tell you, whatever people continue to say at auto parts stores or people that you talk to, it's a wives' tale. It is not a tune-up. So I say that way because it's really frustrating to hear so many people, thousands of times, always saying, it's the spark plug. I know what's wrong. It's the spark plugs. How can it just be the spark plugs if you don't even know? If you haven't even checked them or don't know anything about how to diagnose or what symptoms are and what symptoms you get from certain fault codes. If you're not a mechanic or a technician, don't know these things, then just saying it needs spark plugs is just as dumb as saying my air conditioner doesn't work, it needs Freon. It's not called Freon, it's called refrigerant. So that is my little rant in this video, but you get what I'm saying. So that's what I'm going to do today, is get this pretty big chunk of the tune-up out of the way. And just so everyone's clear, a tune-up can mean anything under the sun that you do to your engine, not rebuilding it or anything like that, that is a part outside on the engine, a sensor or a component that affects how the engine runs. Okay? That is my personal opinion, and that will just help straighten a lot of people out. A tune-up is a whole lot more than just spark plugs. So you're going to enjoy this video. Stay tuned. I'm going to show you step by step how to do this. I'm going to show you the parts I use, and I'll do my best to show you all the tools that I use, and I'll also do my best to make sure I can make this video as thorough as possible so that you can follow along and do it yourself. So I'll go ahead and just get right into it. In the next clip, I'm going to show you some of the tools I'm going to use, and I might add more to that later on, and I'll just tell you when I'm doing the work. But for starters, I'll show you the parts and some of the initial tools I'm going to use to kind of get this job started. The specifications for this job: spark plug torque, 15 foot-pounds. The gap is 0.043 thousandths of an inch or 1 millimeter. Intake plenum or intake manifold bolt torque, 17 foot-pounds. And then the ignition coil hold down bolts, 89 inch-pounds. That's 89 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds. If you want foot-pounds, it's roughly going to be between 6 and 7 foot-pounds. This is what I'm going to be replacing. These are all my new coils, and these are all my spark plugs. And for this particular engine here, and I recommend anyone, if you're going to change spark plugs, use the genuine spark plugs that go into this engine. They're not that expensive compared to going to AutoZone or O'Reilly or something like that. Your most expensive spark plug is going to be around the same price or a bit cheaper when you go directly to the dealer. So these are the plugs that I'm using directly with the VIN number, and just going to my local Chevy dealer. This is what I got. This is what I'm going to put in there. Now, make sure that you do not use anti-seize. A lot of people are confused about this. Don't be confused anymore. If it has a shiny, shiny complexion on it, there's a one-time use only coating built into the threads, on top of the threads, with anti-seize. So if you're going to use anti-seize, there's a special procedure for that. You would just use about 10 to 15% less torque. But there is no point in using anti-seize because when you go and you put it in, it's actually going to be a little bit tighter because the anti-seize will allow the threads to really just become really tight because of the slipperiness of the anti-seize. So you could break threads. You could do damage to the cylinder head. So let's not do that. And so let's do it the right way. And also when you pull the plugs out, make sure you compare them to each other to make sure that they're the same length and shape and size and threads and everything. Everything's got to be identical. And you'll want to gap your spark plugs as well. For starters, you'll need a 3/8 of an inch ratchet and use a proper spark plug removal socket is 5/8 or 16 millimeter. And then I like to have a stubby ratchet. And of course you'll need other tools to do this job, but this is going to kind of just be the basic here to get you started. And then have a little bit of dielectric grease, and you'll put a little bit of that here on all of your spark plugs to make, when you put them in, it just gives it a tight seal and keeps water out and keeps it for later on for removal. They'll come out real easy. Get your safety glasses on, and I'm back here on the passenger side rear seat, and I'm gonna disconnect the negative side of the battery. So there's you gotta slide the driver's side seat forward a little bit here, passenger driver's side seat forward here, and give yourself room because it covers right here. And so you get these little things off, these little plates here that go in the rails of the back seats here, and you see how it's got these little tips here that they're little inserts that go inside here and here all the way around. You just have to pop these things off. They should come off real easy. So get this one out of the way here. You can leave this one on and then get this one off out of the way because it covers the corner here. And so get those out of the way. Then get yourself a nut driver with a T20 because you're going to need to have that to remove this out of the way so you could get this cover off. So once you get this cover off, then you're going to see the negative side here, and you're just going to need a 10 millimeter socket and a ratchet in order to get the negative side of the battery disconnected here. Now, before you do this, make sure you document all your fault codes so that you'll know what they were, and if they continue to come back, then you'll know how to proceed with your diagnostic after that, your follow-up diagnostics, I mean, rather. And if also, if you need to make some documentation of that as well on your invoice, if you're doing this as a job that you're being paid to do, then it's also a good idea to document all those fault codes. And you can also progress your repair as well, so you can see what you're fixing and what still needs to be done and all that. So a whole bunch of good things to good reasons rather to document all those fault codes before you go ahead and just rip everything apart. This is a pretty straightforward job here to remove the upper plenum or intake manifold, and a lot of these late model Chevys and GMs, the oil fill cap is incorporated into the cover here, this little beauty cover I call it. Anyway, so it goes right in here, so you'll just go ahead and loosen that cap here and you'll get it off. And as soon as you take the oil fill cap off for the engine, just go ahead and put it back in so nothing falls in, so you don't lose the cap. And I got some of this kind of taken apart so it'll be easier to show in the video. So get this one out of the way. And you'll see this carpet looking thing here that's got a whole bunch of holes in it here. And I don't know what this does. If anyone knows what this does, I don't see a purpose for it. A lot of vehicles don't use them. I just see them a lot on Chevys and GMs and Saturns and all that. So of that type of manufacturer uses these. And so it's got all these different holes to fit for the, here it's got some bolts here that fit the cover on. The cover fits into these little rubber boots that hold it in. And then these parts go back around the part of the manifold back here. So if you're real gentle and just kind of peel it back and move a little bit at a time, you can keep this little piece of plenum carpet, is what I'm going to call it, and you'll keep it in good shape so you can reuse it again and just put things back the way that you found it. So get that out of the way, and then what you'll need to start doing here is you'll take a flathead screwdriver and you'll just loosen up these two clamps here, and loosen them up almost as much as you can go, because as soon as you start wiggling on them sideways, they'll kind of bind up because these get tight again because you didn't loosen it up enough, and when you turn it sideways it just seems to get tighter around where you're taking it off. So the mass airflow sensor and then the throttle body. Now before you rip this thing off out of the way, make sure that you be careful to notice right here that this has a little push tab here, and so you'll push it all the way over and then you'll gently just wiggle it off, or you could pull it back from here where it's got that little boot right there. Now that you've got that off, then you can just go ahead and pull the boot out of the way, and that'll give you a bunch of working room, so get that out of the way. And organization is key when you are working on a car in order to make sure you get things put back together properly. And looks like this got a little bit of oil residual in here, the throttle body. So go ahead and wipe all that out. And then what you'll want to do is you're basically trying to get everything off of the engine So there's a 10 millimeter headed bolt here. These are all your wiring that go to the electrical of the car. And then you got some hoses here. This one here you can get off with this tool here. So you get that and twist that off and get that out of the way real gentle. And be careful not to break it. There's the PCV valve is right here. So just be gentle as you're pulling that off. And then right here, this little unit canister right here, which has something to do with the evap system, is got a hose on here. So if you look here, as you slide it forward, it wants to latch down, and if you push it back, it wants to release. So push it back that way, and then you should be able to wiggle this off and get that out of the way. And then once you get this whole thing out of the way, you can just move it over here to the right of the engine, driver's side. Here you have the evap canister purge valve, and so disconnect this. And I use this tool here. Works very well for disconnecting those things. As you can see, works very well. You can tell how it can pinch in a tiny area, concentrated area, and then you can be able to pull back and get a connector off. And then real gently do the same thing with this evap hose here. These two pinch together like that. So you can see how as you pinch it, it allows you to be able to pull it backwards and get that out of the way. Be real gentle about that. And then what I used for this was I used this clip pry tool and gently wiggled it like that. If you go and pull on it, you'll snap that off right there, and then you're going to have a problem. Now back here, if you follow it back in there, you'll see that it's got another connector just like the one that we took off right here. And it's got a little tab here that you can push like that. And so reach back there, right back here, and you'll see where the hose goes. And then you just get this hose out of the way. Then what you can do is you can take a bungee cord, you can hook it around these cables here, and then there's a little hole I found up here by the fender, and I just connected it up here just to pull stuff out of the way and make room to get this upper plenum off. Then you'll use a 13 millimeter. I found it was easy to use this setup here and then a ratchet to get all of the 6 bolts out of the intake plenum here. So you got 3 right there, and 1, 2, 3, and then you got 2 here, and then you have to take out 1 10 millimeter screw bolt to take this off here. So if you don't do that and get that over, you won't get the last bolt down here. There's 6 of them. So right here where you see my finger moving, there's another little short bolt that goes in there. This one here. And make sure you make note of which sleeves were left in. There's these little plastic sleeves on the bolts. And as you can see here, I see one here and here. in these here. So make sure you know which bolts came with them. So as you can see here, there's not one on there, but then you can see here, there is one on there like that. And so keep all that in, you know, keep track of all that and make sure that that all goes in properly. Now, once you've got everything disconnected like I just showed you here, the plenum can come out of the way now. And so use two hands and gently twist and gently just move it out of the way real slow, like that. And then pull it away from the engine. And have that out of the way. Now you've exposed where you could get to the coils. So you can easily get to the coils in the back and to the front so that you could start changing these spark plugs. I've got some spare kind of half dirty shop rags here. And what you want to do is vacuum all this whole area here so nothing falls in, and then plug these ports off because these go directly into the cylinder head, the valve area. So plug them all off and then you'll be thankful you did, because if anything falls, it's gonna be right here on the top and it won't actually fall into the engine. And this is a good practice to make sure you don't have any cause any problems while you're trying to fix problems. So as an auto repair technician, mechanic, and if you're doing this for money, you need to make sure that you do all of these things in order to prevent any mishaps, accidents, any stupid things from happening. And this is how you ensure that that happens, that it doesn't happen rather, so you can make sure that you do a good job and you don't do anything wrong and you don't have any further issues. And you know, if you're going to be fixing cars, try not to break them as you're fixing them. And it also is just really will, you know, be a big time saver, because I have dropped things in there, but if you know what you dropped in there and you get that thing that you dropped in there out, then you're good. So if you know what tools you're using and you kind of keep everything organized, as you can see that I pretty much know where all my nuts and bolts are and how everything's laid out. And then over here where I've got everything all organized and set up to where I want it so it can easily be put back on later, it'll just really make the job go back together easier and the job will be not quite so difficult. Next, you'll remove all these connectors that connect to the coils, and they're pretty straightforward. You just push on the back side of it like this, and they're kind of have a little bit of a spring going there. And then they'll release off the little tip here on the tip of the coil here. It's got like a little reverse facing hook on it. So you just push that and pull it back. So get all three of these done here, and then move your way up to the front and get all these done here. And then get yourself a stubby, which should work fine here with a 10 millimeter. It's a 3/8 stubby with a 10 millimeter deep socket. And get all these bolts out here. And so everything that you see here in the camera, you just do to the coils up in the front of the engine. So these are the ones that in the back I'm doing right now. And once you get them all loose, it's real easy to just use the socket to get them sped out of there real quick, you know. Then go ahead and get these 3 front coils out. case you wanted to know what shop vac I use here, this is a Porter Cable lithium ion 20 volt series family little nice little portable vac here. They come in very handy for doing auto repair. If you don't have one and you do a lot of auto repair, you work at a shop, get one. They are very, very good to have. This next step is what I like to do to prevent any issues with spark plugs coming out. And you don't have to use PB Blaster. You can use whatever you want to use as long as it's going to have the correct type of chemical in there to loosen rusted on whatever types of, that seeps into the threads to get things to get loose. This type of penetrating oil or penetrating lubricant of something like this. And I just like to give a shot in each of the holes here, the tubes that go down into the spark plug through the cylinder head, that actually go through the valve cover rather, and just get everything a chance to give this job every chance to be a successful repair without incident. And by doing this, what you're doing is you're ensuring that you are doing everything you can to make sure that you get these old spark plugs out. And I think these are the original plugs. So it seems like I get a lot of these kinds of vehicles that just nobody ever does any maintenance on them. And this isn't an extremely expensive job to do. It's probably about 3 hours labor from beginning to end, maybe 4 if you're taking your time or have never done it before. And after you watch this video, you could probably do it in 2.5 hours or something like that, because I'm giving you all these little shortcuts and tips here. So you could just kind of just smoothly go through this job and just get everything done and make sure that you don't have any issues. So that's why I do this. And I think the plugs are going to come out real easy. It's been about 5 minutes of soaking. And so now I'm going to go ahead and get these plugs out of there. And I'm already feeling like I'm kind of fighting them a little bit. So I might give that a bit more time to soak. See if this one is any better here. That one is really in there. Let's try this one here, see if we get any luck. And don't be scared to let them soak a little bit longer. I mean, just let them soak a little bit longer and you should be okay. And if you got to put a breaker bar on your ratchet, that's a problem. So you should be able to do it with just a standard 8, 9, 10 inch handle like this here. You shouldn't have to use any long handled one or anything like that, or a breaker bar. They should come out just from soaking them like this. And so I'm going to let them soak a bit more. It seems like they just don't want to come out. So I'll go ahead and do that and give it another try here in another 5 minutes. I was able to get them loose after about another 10 minutes of soaking and a squirt of the PB Blaster. And I just used my regular size 3/8 square drive ratchet to do that. Standard handle. And once you get it loose, you might hear it kind of making a squeaky sound or a creaking sound. And that's okay, but you don't want to keep turning it and loosening it when you hear that. In my experience, it's never been good. And what that could mean is that it's just the noise of the threads hitting against the threads in the cylinder head, the spark plug threads. And it's just making that noise because you're trying to basically break 200,000 miles. And in this case, this is a 9-year-old vehicle of heat and the going from cold engine to hot engine and doing that thousands of times, and then possibly a little bit of hydrocarbons in the threads and all that. So don't think there's any rust in here, but I've heard that sound before. But aluminum cylinder head, when you're removing a spark plug, has a distinct sound that sounds like what you just heard. So you just want to be careful and do what I'm showing you here so that you don't have any issues. What I'm just using a little quarter-inch drive breaker bar here so that I can go left and right. So tightening, loosening, and kind of let that PB blaster work its way down the threads. And by doing this, you're giving that whatever you're trying to loosen, in this case the spark plug, you're giving those threads every chance to come out without damaging anything. And that's the reason why I'm doing all this extra work here. I definitely do not want to damage the threads here in the cylinder head. You do not either. So do it this way. You really just will thank yourself for doing this. Because if you don't do this and you continue to keep turning it and forcing it out, that's when you'll break threads or snap the spark plug off in there or some crazy stuff like that. So don't be one of those guys who just like a bull in a china cabinet with things. And this is so critical. Yes, the threads can be repaired. I know that. But why do all that? Why waste all that time if you could just spend a few more minutes doing this and go have a cup of coffee and let it soak and then come back and get them out? After doing this a little bit, it should come out. If not, then just get your ratchet back on it and just turn it real slow. And doing this back and forth stuff that I just showed you is really going to just do a lot for getting these out without any issue. And my socket doesn't have a magnet on it, so what I try to do, if I don't have a magnet real close by, is once I get it completely loose, then what I'll do is I'll kind of push like that and hold it up and try to see if I can get it to come out like sideways. But I wasn't able to do it, so I got to get a magnet to pull that out. There we go. And come over here and have a quick examination. This is the original AC Delco spark plug. Damn. 200,000 miles, man. Just tells you people don't like spending money on their vehicles. And a simple thing like this can prevent misfiring, can prevent all sorts of issues. These are iridium spark plugs, so yeah, they can go 100,000 miles, no problem. But at some point, you just got to think to yourself or question how long those spark plugs have been in there. Ask anyone. Most people know that spark plugs need to be changed as a regular maintenance thing and as a part of a tune-up. And I can see here, this thing, the tip prong on it there, that part of the spark plug is really worn thin. So these spark plugs, even though iridium, they can still wear out. So that's why it's so important to be on top of a maintenance schedule and get these services done. Anyway, change your spark plugs. Don't be cheap about it. It's not a big deal. And this job here, once you're done watching this video, you're going to be a pro and you're going to be able to just rip this manifold off and get these plugs out and do this like a pro. And you're going to have a smooth running engine, probably get a whole lot better MPGs and a little bit extra horsepower that's been taken from you because of neglect. And you'll restore it and it'll just be a much better day for you. And you know, you're getting a huge jump start on doing some tune-up stuff to it. And these are very, very important things to do to make your vehicle run right. So I'm over here with the new spark plugs and the old spark plugs, and I just want to give you a couple of pointers before you put them in. You're going to need a feeler gauge, which is what this is. And if you don't know what to buy, this is what you'll buy. This brand is OEM, and the part number is 25025. And if you'll remember at the beginning of the video, I put down what the gap was. So it's 0.043 thousandths of an inch, and you'll get your feeler gauge, and you'll put the two nearest ones together. As you can see here, 0.022, 0.021, 20 for this, added to 20 to that makes 40, plus the 2, plus the 3, that makes 43. There's our spec. Slide these two together, and then come over here. You'll need two hands to do this, and watch that little needle tip there, and just be really, really super gentle with it. And then you'll stick the feeler gauge right in there, and make sure that the gap, that this feeler gauge slides in and out easily. So just be super gentle. If you have to use anything to pull that little hooked tip on the tip of the spark plug, just use a pair of slip joint pliers and go, I'll show you on one of these ones here, and you'll just hold one in one hand, and you'll grab the tip here real gently, and then you'll hold the other end of the spark plug and just rotate backwards. And do not touch that needle tip electrode of the spark plug, or you'll damage it and you'll have to get another spark plug. Now once you get all 6 of your spark plugs all gapped to 43 thousandths of an inch, then what you're going to do is you're going to put a piece of rubber hose on each of the... You'll get a piece of rubber hose, and for each time, see, as you can see here, I've already got one here, but I don't think I can get that out with one hand, so maybe I'll have to look and see if I got another piece of hose here. And just find something that's suitable, that is a few inches long, that you can put on the tip of the spark plug. And I think this one will work here. And so stick that on the tip of the spark plug, like that, and then you could just gently thread it down in there. And so go real slow by hand, okay? So you'll go real slow by hand and just let it kind of fall in there real gently, and then you'll just start threading it, and it should go in pretty reasonably easy. And if you feel like it isn't, then back it off and start it again. If it gets tight at the very beginning, that should tell you, that's your clue that you're starting to cross thread it. So back it off, and that's why you're doing it with your fingers. So you can just real gently just put it in there. Now once you get one full complete turn, then you can feel pretty confident that you are good to go. So go, and to go ahead and put your socket on it is what I'm saying. So once you feel like it starts to thread in, you get one full complete turn without any resistance. And usually spark plugs will go in real easy. And in this case, it just doesn't seem like it is, probably because I sprayed a little tiny bit of carburetor parts cleaner in here to wash out the PD blaster. But you get what I'm saying. You don't want to strip these threads. You want to do this part really slow and methodical. You don't want to rush this step. So once you get all the spark plugs in and just seat them in there, then you're going to follow them up with your torque wrench. One important thing I want to mention is that when you remove all the spark plugs, try to keep them separate from the brand new ones. I've already put 5 in the engine already with my little piece of rubber hose here. And I just wanted to leave this one out to just show you that you need to be 100% sure that the spark plug is the same in every way. Sometimes the part number might not match because dealers, they have part numbers that supersede each other over the years, or you might be getting a different brand that isn't the exact one you're pulling out. Make sure the threads are the same length. Make sure that you've got the correct taper on here. As you can see, it's got a taper. There's no washer here. And just make sure that everything looks identical before you go ahead and stick them in. And make sure that you don't put any of the old spark plugs in, or you're going to be really mad when you go and put it all back together, only to find out that you've got one of the old spark plugs mixed in with the new ones. So keep the new ones separate from the old ones, and I can see for sure definitely that these are all the old ones here. and then I'm just doing one at a time to make sure that I don't get them wrong and get them all in there and do it right the first time. Now, another thing I'll mention as well is that if you're not really 1,000% sure if your spark plug is being threaded in right, look in there. See, if you look in there, you can see it straight up and down, and there's even spacing all the way around this tube that goes in, the spark plug tube that goes in through the valve cover. It goes down into the cylinder head. So if you look closely, you'll see that it's directly center. And that's how you can kind of know, and this is useful for when you're putting anything in that requires this type of thing. There are like brake fittings that you can look at to do the same thing to make sure that everything looks perfectly in the middle of the female threads that you're putting it into. And this really helps a lot when you're doing this type of work. So you'll take this ratchet setup here with like a 2 or 3 inch extension and use your proper spark plug socket, 5/8 or 16 millimeter. And I like to use a stubby ratchet because it's helpful to just in tight spaces. And in this case, we've got some tight spaces to work with. And you just go around after you got all your spark plugs in loose with that piece of hose that I was using. Then you'll go and you'll start back here, or you start up here, it doesn't matter, but just make sure you get all 6 of them. And you just go and just basically tighten them all down until they come to a stop. And then that's pretty much probably already about 8 foot-pounds there. And then, which you're halfway there. And then you take your torque wrench. If your torque wrench does inches, then what you need to do is set it to 180 inch-pounds, which makes it 15 foot-pounds. So just a regular 3/8 drive, square drive torque wrench that is capable of doing 15 foot-pounds. And so I've got mine set here. This particular torque wrench uses inch-pounds to set the torque, not full foot-pounds. So I got it set to 180 inch-pounds, and so I'm going to go and just get each spark plug one at a time. And like I was saying, I was already about there because I didn't have to turn, but maybe just like 20 degrees is all that I needed to get this to 15 foot-pounds. Now, a tip I'll share with you is when you have an extension down there and you have the ratchet in there, pull the ratchet off and then gently pull your setup here out of the way, because if you go to pull it up and it drops down, or if you kink it or something, you might damage the tip of the spark plug. So just be mindful of that. So go through and do each one at a time. All 6 of them torqued, go back and do them all again to make sure you did it, so that there's absolutely no question in your mind that you've done it right. Now, if you feel like you damaged a spark plug, remove it and fix it before you move on to do anything else. It's just the best way to do it. Just stop, fix that mistake, and then continue on and finish your repair, because this plenum goes back on it, and once you make a mistake on these back cylinders, you're screwed. And even on the front cylinders too, because it kind of covers the plenum, kind of covers the front ones halfway too. So you want to make sure that whatever you do, you're doing it right every spark plug, so that all 6 are done properly with no issues. So when you put it all back together and turn the key, it's going to start up and you're not going to have any issues at all with your repair. It's always a good idea to use an inspection mirror when you're doing things where you can't actually like face it and like look down. And in this case, I'm trying to look at the spark plugs and make sure there's no obstructions and make sure everything looks good. I've already torqued everything down, and so now I'm just double checking to make sure everything's good. and then I just take my mirror and look down, and I can see the spark plug is good and in place and perfectly straight and no obstructions. And I'll just go along and I'll check each one and just make sure it all looks good. And what this does is, this is just job security in the sense of you taking your time and you doing the job the right way and spending a few extra minutes to make sure everything looks good. And this just ensures that the job will be a complete success. And also, if you have any issues, you can deal with them before you continue on, and it's a time saver. I've saved the last coil to show you how they all go in. I've already done 5 of them now. You take the coil, and the reason why in the very beginning of the video I showed some of the things you're going to need. So you put a little bit of dielectric grease on the tip here of the boot where you see my pinky touching. And I kind of got a little overzealous there. The can just kind of started spraying it in there too quick. But, you know, a little bit, that much or less is okay. You just want to have a little bit in there. And then what you do is you could put like a little bit of silicone spray. This stuff I like to get is called heavy duty silicone spray. And just spray a little bit of that on the boot there. And also a little bit of this electronic connector cleaner and spray that. I have already done it, but spray that in all of the connectors for all of your coils. And then you just basically slide it in and line up the coil to where the threads, it can get started, the threads here with the little bolt here, this retainer bolt. And then push down on it like that. Now make sure that the connector is not underneath of the coil, or you're going to wonder why it won't go down all the way and why it isn't working. And then just go and get it all the way tight here. And then you'll see that there's basically no more threads left. And then you'll start to feel it get tight. And just give it a little bit of this much. That's about it. And the coil's good and tight and in there. And then reconnect. And you hear it snap in. That's the sound you want to hear. And then try to push back on it to make sure it won't come off. So I heard it snap on, and then I can actually look in here and see where the clip made its way over the little tooth here on the tip of the ignition coil. So never hurts to double check. Don't go too hard on it because you could snap it off. So I just push it back on again as hard as I did the last time. And then I push backwards on it and make sure it's not going to come off. So do that for all the 3 back there. Do that for all the 3 here. And then get your torque wrench and set it to 89 inch-pounds and go hit all your bolts and make sure that you're there. So do that for the same for all of the other ones. As you can see, I'm all done now. I've got everything back in, and I've painted all of my bolts just to let me know later on when I do my final inspection. It's just quick and easy to tell that all of my bolts are tight, and it makes it a breeze to just go through and double check everything before I give it back to the customer. And it just lets me know that I've done it. And then I like to number all of my cylinders for purposes of diagnosing later on in the future. If you number them all, then it's easy to keep track of where they all go and for when you're doing diagnostics. Now we've reached the point where you can pull these out, make sure there's nothing here before you pull them out, and get all this out of the way. And you'll want to go and inspect all these ports here around where the gasket is to make sure that everything looks good and clean in condition. so that everything looks like it's good and clean and there's no cracks in these silicone gaskets that go around this plastic upper plenum intake manifold gasket here. And if everything looks good and the car isn't too terribly old, like in this case, it's a little bit old, it's about 9 years old, and this gasket isn't sold separately, so I'm just gonna make sure it's all clean, everything looks good. I'm gonna take it off and clean underneath and make sure all the mating surfaces are all good and clean. And then I'll do the same thing over here. Make sure everything looks good. If you have any doubt about this upper or plenum gasket, intake manifold gasket, if you have any doubt, if it looks like it's in any way not in good condition, then replace it. But for me, I got to warranty the job. I don't really want to replace it. It's going to be a whole lot more in parts. I do factor these things in when I give people estimates. However, this time I just didn't factor the intake manifold gasket into the estimate price. So I'm just going to vacuum everything up here and clean the gasket on both sides. If it looks good, I'm just going to reuse it and pretty much keep my fingers crossed. But if I have any doubt, I'm not going to use it. I'm ready to put the intake manifold back on. One thing I wanted to mention is if you take off this plastic with the silicone around each port here of the opening for to go down into the engine, make sure that you get the gasket put on the right way. It can only go on one way, but make sure that it's sitting level and flat, and you clean the surface on the cylinder head or the lower intake, and then on the plenum itself. Make sure everything's clean, and then just make sure nothing falls in. And this part right here is a little bit critical, but if you go slow, you'll get it right. So just make sure that you just kind of angle it in and go slow. Watch out for this air conditioner line here on the driver's side, and just real gently just walk it in real slow. And this is not a race. Move this harness out of the way and just gently let it kind of fall into place here, and you'll know you're getting it on right because you'll start to kind of see it get centered in the engine, and you'll start to you'll feel it at some point. You'll feel it seat down as you kind of move around. Now, you can also look for this hole here up here in the front, this furthest hole here in this upper plenum here. You can look to see where it lines up with the other one, and then just kind of move it real slowly until you get it into that where it lines up there, and should just fall into place there. And remember, this short bolt here goes into the up here, this bolt here that goes to the furthest to the driver's side here. And then you can start putting in all your bolts here. Get everything started by hand. And you can't make a mistake with these bolts because they're all the same length. And then so what you do is you feel for when you start threading them in. You'll start feeling them grab the threads there. Take your 13mm socket, and then you can start going around, and once you get everything finger started, then you can just go and you can start cinching this all down. Make sure there's nothing stuck underneath the plenum preventing it from making a tight seal onto the gasket. So this little piece of foam here, just make sure it's kind of pushed out of the way a little bit. This is not a race. Just be gentle. Slow to go fast is what I always say in my head when I'm doing repairs, and what I tell people in my videos, and just general advice on how to kind of approach auto repair. The torque specification for tightening up the upper plenum is 17 foot-pounds or 204 inch-pounds. This is measured in inches, so I got to do the inches to 204. And once you've gone down and just tightened all 6 of these bolts here with your little stubby ratchet, which is very useful for tight places, and it just makes it easier to do the job. Okay, so once you get all of them tight, then what I like to do is I like to start from over here on the far right and go in a circle clockwise. Make sure I got them all. And very good. So everything that you removed off the air cleaner boot and everything and all the connectors, this is just all in the reverse of the removal. And so you're starting from all the pieces taken off, and then you put everything back on in the reverse order until you have a running engine. So you start off with this piece, and then the next piece, and the next piece, and then you just basically work in reverse and put everything back in. Everything's just kind of be like pages of a book, all the layers of everything and the parts you're taking off until the very, very last thing you take off is going to be the very, very first thing that you put on. So the very first thing you took off is going to be the very last thing that you put on. This is going to be a very helpful tip as far as towards the end of the repair, you're going to be putting a lot of these connectors that you took off back on, and they got O-rings and things like that in them. And so like in this case, in the center there's a little O-ring in there, and then here, there's little O-rings there as well. And you want to use a little bit of this heavy-duty silicone spray and spray it around all the things that you're going to be putting back together, so that everything just goes back on easy and no issues, and everybody's happy and the job goes good. So you'll take and put a little bit of this silicone spray on there and go back to this back hose here and line that up there on the little nipple there in the back, and it should slide on real easy. Just be real gentle and then push it down until you hear it click. And then same thing with this one. Give it a little extra if you need to. Just push it down until it seats all the way in, and then you can just double check it's all good. Make sure this is all good, and then you just do the same for everything else. This hose here, and then this one here that goes to this little unit here, and then the hose here that goes to the evap purge canister valve right here up underneath the near the throttle body, and get all that back together. I'm not going to put the little top carpet piece on yet, and I'm not going to put the cover on yet until I verify that everything's good. And then once I verified everything's good with my repair, then I'll go ahead and do those final steps and button the whole job up and have it all back together, and hopefully everything will be a complete success. So after a few attempted cranks, I finally got the engine to start, and it took a bit to start because there was a little bit of brake parts cleaner that I sprayed into the engine and the PB blaster that drained in there. So this is just common. This is just what you got to do to be a mechanic. These things happen. But the engine started and it runs smooth, which means I got everything right and there's no issues there. So if you do run into that issue watching this video and you get to that point where the car won't start, keep cranking it, it'll start. Give it a little bit of throttle, just a tiny bit. And once you get all that stuff worked out, all the chemicals I sprayed that you sprayed in there, if you do it that way, it'll start up, it'll run, and it'll be fine. That's how you do spark plugs and ignition coils on a 2011 or similar model vintage of GMCs, Chevys, and in this case, this is the 3.6 liter engine. So now you know how to do it. You did a good job. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.